Labrador finds three dying tiger cubs. Then something incredible happens. 2 years later. The dense forest was eerily silent, the usual cacophony of chirping birds and rustling leaves replaced by an unsettling stillness. A golden Labrador named Max, known for his boundless energy and insatiable curiosity, trotted purposefully along the edge of the woods. Max was no ordinary dog. He had an innate knack for sensing when something was wrong, a quality that endeared him to the small community he lived in. This particular evening, however, his behavior was different. He seemed restless, his ears perked, nose twitching as if picking up an unusual scent carried on the wind. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, but Max's attention was entirely focused on the faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from deeper within the forest. It was a sound that tugged at his instincts, a weak, plaintive cry that spoke of desperation. His owner, a wildlife photographer named Clara, called out to him, her voice tinged with concern. But Max didn't turn back. Instead, he bolted into the trees, his sleek frame disappearing into the shadows. Clara, alarmed by his sudden departure, grabbed her flashlight and followed him. The forest was dense, the underbrush thick and unyielding, but Clara pushed forward, calling Max's name. She trusted her loyal companion. If he was this determined, there was surely a reason. As Clara approached a small clearing, she saw Max standing still, his tail low and ears pinned back, a posture she recognized as one of concern. When she reached his side, the beam of her flashlight fell upon a heartbreaking sight. 3 tiny tiger cubs huddled together in the grass. They were emaciated, their ribs visible beneath patchy fur, their eyes barely open. One let out a feeble cry, the sound that had drawn Max here. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She crouched down, trying not to startle the cubs, though they were too weak to react. Their mother was nowhere in sight. Clara scanned the area, her heart sinking as she realized the grim reality. These cubs had been abandoned or orphaned, left to fend for themselves in a world that showed no mercy to the weak. Max, as if sensing their plight, gently nudged one of the cubs with his nose, a gesture so tender it brought tears to Clara's eyes. Here was a dog, a domesticated animal with no connection to the wild, offering comfort to creatures who were supposed to be his natural adversaries. It was a moment that transcended logic, a silent testament to the purity of Max's heart. Clara knew there wasn't much time. The cubs were on the brink of death, their tiny bodies unable to withstand the harsh conditions any longer. With Max standing protectively over them, she made a decision. Wrapping the cubs carefully in her jacket, she whispered a silent promise to them and to herself. They would not be left behind. As she carried the cubs back toward safety, Max walked beside her, his eyes never leaving the fragile lives he had just saved. It was the beginning of a journey that would change all their lives forever. The drive back to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was tense. Clara kept glancing in the rearview mirror, where the tiger cubs lay bundled in her jacket on the back seat. Their fragile forms barely moved, and the faint rise and fall of their chests was the only sign of life. Beside her, Max sat upright, his usually playful demeanor replaced with a quiet intensity. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation in a way that Clara couldn't quite comprehend. When they arrived at the center, the staff quickly took over, rushing the cubs inside for emergency care. Clara hesitated to let Max out of her sight, but his insistent whine made it clear he wasn't going anywhere until he saw what happened next. With a nod from the head veterinarian, Clara led Max into the examination room. The cubs were critically weak, dehydrated, malnourished, and hypothermic. As the team worked to stabilize them, Max sat quietly in a corner, his eyes following every movement. But when one of the cubs let out a faint, distressed cry, Max was on his feet in an instant. He approached the cub gently, his tail wagging in slow, reassuring arcs. The veterinarians paused, exchanging uncertain glances, but Clara urged them to let Max stay. What happened next astonished everyone. Max began licking the cub's tiny head, his warm breath seeming to soothe the trembling creature. The cub, too weak to resist, eventually relaxed under Max's care. The sight of a dog, a domestic animal, comforting a wild predator, left the entire room speechless. It was as though Max instinctively knew what the cub needed: protection, warmth, and love. Over the next few days, Max became an unofficial member of the rehabilitation team. He refused to leave the cub's side, even sleeping near their enclosure at night. The staff noticed something remarkable. The cubs responded more positively when Max was around. They seemed calmer, their frail bodies gaining strength faster than expected. Max's bond with the cubs deepened as they began to recover. When they were strong enough to move around, Max encouraged them with playful nudges and gentle barks. Despite the stark differences in size and species, he treated them as if they were his own. The cubs, in turn, began to mimic some of Max's behaviors, following him around and even attempting to wag their tiny tails. Clara documented every moment, her camera capturing scenes that felt almost too surreal to be real. The story of Max and the tiger cubs quickly spread beyond the center, touching hearts around the world. People marveled at the Labrador's natural heroism, his instinctive ability to nurture creatures that should have been his enemies. Max's actions were more than just an anomaly. They were a testament to the boundless potential of love and compassion. He wasn't just saving the cubs' lives. He was teaching everyone who witnessed his journey a profound lesson about the power of connection across boundaries, even those set by nature itself. The days that followed were a blur of worry and hope. The tiger cubs were still weak, their bodies fragile and their survival uncertain. But Max, ever watchful, never strayed far from their side. He would sit by their enclosures, his soulful eyes never leaving them, as if reminding the cubs and everyone around him that they weren't alone. He had done the impossible once, finding them in the heart of the forest, and now he was determined to see them through the fight for their lives. The veterinarians worked tirelessly, administering fluids, food, and medications to stabilize the cubs, but it was clear that nature itself was a powerful adversary. The smallest cub, a female with faint stripes and large, sorrowful eyes, struggled the most. She refused to eat, her small body too weak to even show interest in the milk that was being offered. Clara and the staff watched helplessly as she barely moved, her survival hanging by a thread. Max, however, refused to give up. Each day as Clara entered the room, Max was already there, his tail wagging slightly as if he could sense the urgency. One morning, Clara noticed something different. The cub, whom they had named Tara, was still motionless, but as Max approached her, something changed. Tara lifted her head, weakly but deliberately, and sniffed the air. Then she looked up at Max with an expression that seemed to say, "Help me." Without hesitation, Max laid down beside her, nuzzling her gently with his nose. Tara hesitated for a moment, but then, as if drawn by some invisible thread, she inched closer to him. Max began licking her face and neck, his warm tongue soothing the chills that had plagued her. The connection between the two was undeniable. Slowly but surely, Tara's breathing steadied. Her eyes, once clouded with fear and pain, began to soften. Over the next few days, something miraculous began to happen. Tara started to eat again, Her body responded to Max's care in ways no one could explain. The medical team was cautiously optimistic, but it was clear to everyone involved that the Labrador's presence was having a profound effect on the cub. The other two cubs, though slightly stronger, weren't out of danger yet. Their recovery was slow, and there were setbacks, moments when their health seemed to worsen rather than improve. Max's role became more crucial with each passing hour. During these moments of crisis, Max would lie beside them, his warm body providing a comfort no medication could match. Max's incredible instinct didn't stop at the physical care he offered. He also seemed to understand when the cubs needed emotional support. When they cried out in distress, he would rush to them, his gentle whines a reminder that they were safe. His calm presence seemed to have an almost magical effect, bringing peace to their restless minds. The cubs, still wild by nature, began to trust him, a loyalty built not on fear, but on love and compassion. It wasn't just Max's physical presence that made a difference, it was the belief he instilled in the team. Watching the Labrador care for these wild, vulnerable creatures gave everyone hope. The impossible was becoming possible. They were witnessing a miracle, and in that miracle, there was something profoundly beautiful. A reminder that even in the harshest of circumstances, kindness could still shine through. As the weeks passed, the cubs grew stronger, and so did their bond with Max. What had begun as an act of kindness, a simple act of a dog offering comfort to three helpless tiger cubs, had blossomed into something deeper. The cubs, once weak and on the brink of death, were now gaining weight, their fur becoming glossy and their eyes brighter. And at the heart of their recovery was Max, who continued to act as their protector, guide, and friend. Max's presence had become an anchor. The cubs had learned to associate him with safety, warmth, and reassurance. Every day, as soon as the cubs were awake and ready to begin their physical therapy, Max would be there, waiting patiently by their enclosure. He would nudge them with his nose, his tail wagging eagerly, as if saying, "It's time to play, time to learn, time to live." The cubs, though still wild at heart, responded to him in a way that astonished everyone. Tara, the smallest of the three, would crawl to him first, her tiny body pressing up against his warm fur as she nuzzled him affectionately. The other two cubs followed her lead, their natural instincts now tempered by the love and care Max had shown them. Max would lead them through their daily exercises, encouraging them with gentle nudges and playful barks. He seemed to understand that the cubs needed both physical recovery and emotional reassurance. At first, they stumbled awkwardly, their limbs still unsteady, but under Max's watchful eyes, they began to find their footing. They would follow him around the enclosure, mimicking his movements as if he were teaching them the basics of survival. Tara, always the more cautious one, would cling to Max, her eyes wide with trust. The other cubs, more adventurous, would often chase after him, their wild instincts coming alive as they followed his lead. In these moments, it became clear that something extraordinary was happening. Max was no longer just a dog to the cubs. He had become their mentor, their protector, their family. The bond between them was undeniable, something that transcended species, language, and even the wild boundaries that nature had set. The staff at the rehabilitation center watched in awe as Max and the cubs continued to grow together. Every day, they witnessed the power of love and the resilience of life in ways they never thought possible. The cubs were no longer just wild creatures in need of care. They were young animals thriving in an environment built on trust, compassion, and the bond they shared with Max. Max, too, seemed to undergo a transformation. He had been a hero from the moment he found the cubs, but now he was more than just a savior. He had become a teacher, a leader, and a symbol of hope. The way he guided the cubs, the way he helped them discover their strength and courage, was a testament to his deep understanding of the world around him. In his quiet, unassuming way, Max was showing everyone that the bond between humans and animals was not just about rescue. It was about connection. As the cubs grew older, they began to develop their own personalities. But they never forgot Max. He remained their steady presence, the one constant in a world that had once been so uncertain. Together, they were not just surviving. They were thriving, stronger and more united than ever. 2 years had passed since Max first discovered the 3 tiny tiger cubs in the forest. The seasons had changed, and with each passing year, the cubs, now young tigers, had transformed into magnificent creatures, their once fragile bodies now strong and muscular. Tara, the smallest cub who had once struggled to even lift her head, had grown into a fierce yet gentle tiger with a soft spot for Max. The other 2, with their bold, adventurous personalities, had also thrived under his guidance, becoming symbols of resilience and survival. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center had become a sanctuary for them, but it was no longer just a place of recovery. It was their home. The cubs, though now wild and majestic, had retained their bond with Max, who was no longer just a comforting presence. He was an integral part of their lives. They had learned to hunt, to roam the vast enclosures, and to embrace their instincts as tigers. But there was something more to their transformation, something deeper. They had learned the values of loyalty, trust, and love, values that had been imparted to them by a dog. Max, though aging slightly, had not lost his playfulness. He still ran through the fields with the cubs, leading them in their daily adventures, as if showing them that even in the wild, joy and affection could exist side by side. The cubs, now large enough to match Max's size, would chase him through the tall grass, their roars echoing in the distance as they pounced and played. It was a sight to behold. A Labrador and 3 tigers, united in a bond that defied the natural order. Clara watched from the edge of the enclosure, her heart full of pride. She had seen them all grow from vulnerable, helpless creatures into fierce, beautiful beings who now ruled their domain. Tara, once so fragile, was now the leader of the group, her strength and confidence shining through in every step she took. The other 2 cubs, both powerful males, followed her lead, but it was clear that Max was still the one they looked to for guidance. It was as if, no matter how wild they became, they would never forget the dog who had saved them. One day, as Clara stood by the fence, she noticed something that filled her with both awe and surprise. A large, wild animal had ventured into the center's boundaries. A poacher, perhaps, or a trespasser. But the cubs didn't flee or grow hostile. Instead, they approached Max, their large eyes watching him closely. It was clear that they were no longer the frightened, helpless cubs they had once been. They were warriors now, ready to defend their home. Max, though older, stood tall, his protective instincts never waning. He trotted over to the cubs, his head held high, his tail stiff with determination. Together, the 4 of them faced the intruder, the unspoken bond between them evident in their synchronized movements. Tara, the leader, let out a low growl, followed by the other 2. Max positioned himself between the cubs and the intruder, his stance unwavering. It was a silent promise. We are a family, and we will protect each other. Clara stood in awe, realizing the incredible journey they had all gone through. from 3 vulnerable cubs to this moment of unity and strength. Max had given them more than just survival. He had given them the courage to face the world together, as a family. It was a quiet afternoon at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the kind of day when everything seemed to be in perfect harmony. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the vast enclosure where Max and the tigers roamed freely. Tara, the once fragile cub who had grown into a strong, majestic tigress, played alongside her 2 companions, their movements swift and graceful. Max, as always, was right there with them, running, barking, and showing them the way, his spirit still as lively as ever. Clara, standing just outside the enclosure, smiled as she watched the scene. She had seen the transformation firsthand, from the day Max had first found the cubs to the bond they had forged together. But today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, a slight shift that Clara couldn't quite place. Max, normally so carefree, had become unusually still, his ears perked, his eyes scanning the horizon. Tara, too, seemed to sense something. The playful energy that usually filled the air had faded, replaced by an alertness that none of the animals had shown before. Then, the ground shook. A low rumble reverberated through the earth, followed by the unmistakable sound of crashing trees. Clara's heart raced. The animals were not reacting in fear. They were reacting with purpose. Max, sensing the imminent danger, immediately moved into position, his body tense, his eyes locked on the distance. The cubs, once playful and carefree, now stood by Max, their wild instincts taking over. Tara, the leader, let out a deep growl, and the others followed suit. They were ready. Out of the trees emerged a group of poachers, heavily armed and intent on capturing the tigers. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The threat was real, and it was dangerous. The cubs, now tigers, fierce and strong, were at risk once again, but this time they weren't helpless. They had Max, and they had each other. Max's protective instincts kicked in. He charged forward with a bark so loud it echoed through the trees, a warning to the intruders. Tara, the once fragile cub who had relied on him for comfort, now stood by his side, her tail held high, her growl deep and menacing. The other 2 tigers flanked her, ready for action. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. The poachers hesitated, clearly taken aback by the sight of the fully grown tigers and their unlikely protector. But before they could make another move, Tara lunged forward with lightning speed, her powerful limbs propelling her through the air. Max, keeping pace with her, barked loudly, his presence a beacon of strength and courage. The poachers, realizing they were outmatched, turned and fled, their plans foiled by the fierce determination of a dog and 3 tigers. Clara watched in awe as the poachers retreated into the forest, disappearing from view. Max, Tara, and the other tigers stood tall, their bodies tense but victorious. The bond they had formed, the one that had started with a simple act of kindness, had become something far greater than anyone could have ever imagined. Max had not only saved them once, he had helped them become the protectors of their own home. As Clara walked toward them, tears welled in her eyes. She had witnessed something truly extraordinary. Max had given them the strength to fight for themselves, and in that moment, they had become more than just animals. They had become a family united by love, courage, and an unbreakable bond. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara sat quietly at the edge of the enclosure, her heart full of emotions. The poachers had been driven off, but the events of the day had left a deep mark on everyone, especially her. She watched as Max, now older, but still with the same unwavering strength and loyalty, lay down in the grass, surrounded by Tara, the other two tigers, and the peaceful calm that followed their victory. The bond they shared was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. What had begun as a simple act of rescue, Max finding 3 dying tiger cubs in the forest, had evolved into a deep, unbreakable connection that transcended species. These tigers were no longer just animals under human care. They were warriors, protectors of their home, and a living testament to the power of love, trust, and resilience. And at the heart of it all was Max, the Labrador who had changed everything. Clara felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at the animals. They had come so far from the weak, frightened cubs she had first seen. They had grown into mighty tigers, capable of defending themselves and their territory. But more than that, they had learned to love, to trust, and to be part of something greater than themselves. They had learned from Max, and Max had learned from them. It was a beautiful, symbiotic relationship, a reminder that true strength lies not just in physical power, but in the love we share with those we care about. Max, though tired from the events of the day, still managed to lift his head as Clara approached. His eyes, as wise as ever, met hers with a silent understanding. It was as if he knew the journey they had all been on together had changed them forever. The little Labrador who had once saved 3 tiny cubs had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the undeniable bond between humans and animals. He had taught Clara, and everyone who had witnessed their story, that even in the darkest moments there is light, if only we have the courage to fight for it. Clara bent down and stroked Max's fur, her fingers gently running through his coat. The tigers, now resting nearby, watched the two of them with quiet curiosity, their eyes soft and content. Tara, the once fragile cub who had learned to trust Max first, lay with her head resting on his side. The other 2 tigers nestled close, their strong bodies curled beside Max's tired but loving form. It was a moment of peace, a moment of reflection. In that moment, Clara realized something profound. This wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of transformation. The cubs had transformed from vulnerable creatures into mighty tigers, and Max had transformed from a simple dog into a hero, a leader, and a symbol of the unbreakable bond that had been forged between them. Max's journey wasn't just about saving lives. It was about showing us all that no matter how small, how weak, or how broken we may feel, we all have the capacity to change the world. He had given the cubs a chance to survive, but more than that, he had given them a chance to thrive. And in doing so, he had shown them, and Clara, and the world, that love, loyalty, and courage can overcome even the most impossible odds. As night fell and the stars twinkled above, Clara knew that this was only the beginning. The story of Max and the tigers would continue to inspire, to remind people everywhere that the greatest strength is found in the heart, and the greatest bond is the one built on love. If you were moved by the incredible bond between Max and the tigers, don't forget to share this story with your friends and family. It's a reminder that love, loyalty, and courage can overcome the greatest challenges, no matter the species. Leave a comment below telling us how this heartwarming tale touched you, and be sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories of hope and heroism. Together, we can spread the message that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world. Thank you for being part of this incredible journey,